Hey everybody, welcome back to the Nader Narrative on Jersey First TV and now streaming on NJ. We are so excited about that. We are talking today about New Jersey liquor license reform. This has become a huge issue, lots of debate in the state. And yes, it affects you. It affects you even if you don't own a bar or restaurant, because ultimately it comes down to prices, economy, and all of that. So as consumers, as stakeholders in this state, we need to pay attention to these issues. Now, just so you know, Governor Murphy made this a very important part of his second term, focusing on changing what some call the Prohibition era liquor license laws. And they have been on the books for a long time. Many call them antiquated and confusing and believe they need to be updated. Of course, this does not come without a lot of different opinions. So today we want to bring you some mayors and a town administrator who are standing with Governor Murphy and calling for this change, would have their own viewpoint on it. And I want to welcome them all to the show. We first have Mayor Mike Stanzilis from Mount Arlington. We have Mayor Patty Zahaki from Stanhope and her town administrator, Brian McNeely. Guys, welcome to the Nader Narrative. All of you are part of this bipartisan coalition of 90 mayors, and Brian, we're just going to attach you to Mayor Pat with that, who's standing with Governor Murphy and saying we need change. So Mayor Mike, I'm going to start with you. Let's educate everybody a little bit on why this issue now. Why is it such a big deal?
Well, it's always been a big deal. And so I think Governor Murphy, really took some courage and put the ball in play. We've been talking about this off and on for years, but it takes political courage to do it because of strong forces lobbying against it. And I think in the ballot box, it could have, a negative impact, right? So, we're going to look at this probably in the lame duck session. And I think now is the time to do it. And I'm glad that Governor Murphy has put the ball in play, and we have some legislators that have, kind of getting behind it. But I think they're going to wait this election cycle out. But why now? I think it's, like I said, it's at the end of Governor Murphy's second term, so it's the perfect time for him to do it.
So, Mayor Pat, I want you to sort of summarize what the governor is suggesting and why this is so important. It's interesting that mayors, I think people need to understand that mayors are getting involved in this issue because you're responsible for the businesses in your town and this affects them. So, Mayor Pat, what are some of the specifics of what the governor wants to do?
Well, I was able to actually contact with him on a roundtable discussion that he was involved in. And they feel since Prohibition, 1933, these laws have not changed. So basically in 1948, they only issued a municipality that the population exceeded the limit. So you were able to get one out of 3,000 if you had 3,000. Now, what the governor feels is that this will bring 10,000 more jobs to the area and create over $1 billion in revenue within the 5 years that this is going to go into effect. So it gives our businesses the opportunity to have more, to offer more, and more businesses actually will be able to come into our borough, our residents will be able to enjoy it more because now they have an interest because they can make money on the alcohol.
So this has always been a thing in New Jersey. Is that restaurant bring your own? Do they have a liquor license, right? It's something that we understand as New Jerseyans. We sort of navigate that. Brian, when you look at the businesses in your town, liquor licenses have been expensive. And as Mayor Pat said, they are limited. There is a calculation on how many you can have. And therefore, basic economics, supply and demand, these liquor licenses become very expensive. Brian, how does that impact new bars that want to open in your town, breweries, restaurants?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. I mean, you only have a defined quantity of licenses. So if you do wish to open up in a specific area, you would either got to go pay the freight, whoever has the license already, or you got to wait until they're in a situation where they want to sell it. It does kind of limit your ability to expand. If you have a thriving downtown, you're limited, and it can be a problem. But you did touch on something very specific. You said brewery. They need to be very dynamic in how, when they talk about changing of these laws, specifically how we're going to take care of our breweries, distilleries, and wineries, and making sure that they've got a seat at the discussion table here, because
Yeah.
that is, I think, a very important part of what is part of our uniqueness in New Jersey, and bringing it right down to the street level. And I think that that's a very important thing that we need to have, because every town, you end up with a brewery, distillery, you're going to get a lot more foot traffic coming and going. It's important.
I think we need to talk about the brewery issue specifically here in a minute, because I think that's a big part of this, the current restrictions that they have versus what they could have. But Mayor Mike, I want to summarize for everybody, what is the governor saying? He wants these to be cheaper. He wants them to be more plentiful. Give us a summary of what the governor's plan is.
Yeah, so there's a monopoly right now, and if you're a free market capitalist, and by the way, this is nonpartisan, right? Everyone agrees that there's a strong monopoly and a small group of liquor licenses really keeping people out of the market. Entrepreneurs, right? And you want to come to my town, Mayor Pat's town, and open up a business, you can't. So I lost a business. I mean, there was a restaurateur, a very successful restaurateur that had a property here, that had a plan, that had money, that could not get a liquor license. And it's happening all over the state. I talked to a lot of mayors. I'm on the executive board for the Conference of Mayors. Downtown America, brick and mortar retail is going away, but people still want to go out, right? And where are they going? Like Brian said, they're going out to eat. They're going out to drink, right? They want to go out. We need to service our constituents and allow businesses to come to our towns. As Pat said, billions of dollars of revenue is going to flow our way. It'll create jobs both upstream and downstream in the supply chain. It's a win-win for everyone. But we need to break this monopoly artificially created by antiquated laws.
Yeah. So, and the laws are very old. I mean, I think that in itself, so much has changed. Mayor Pat, when I look at some of the specifics, the population cap would be phased out. So when we look at small towns, and New Jersey has something like 535, I don't know if I have that number right, but it's 500 something towns. We have so many what others would consider to be small towns, and their downtowns are essentially the heartbeat. Without that downtown, there really isn't, a lot for that town to rely on. So first is phasing out the population cap. How would that impact your town?
Well, because my town is a small town, only 3,700 approximately, and it would enable the small mom and pop shops, small people to come and open up a business, and the breweries, small areas. Also, I mean, when I grew up, my parents owned a tavern in Jersey City, Hudson County. So when they passed and we went to sell it, the sale of the liquor license actually exceeded the price of the building that they owned.
Wow.
And that's what Governor Murphy is talking about, having a tax substitute to make up that difference, that people have had that long-term license, that they've owned it for say 30 years. So what he wants to do is give them an opportunity to make some of that money back. That way they don't feel as bad if you're opening up to small venues.
And this is the tax credit you're talking about right now. I think it's about up to 50,000. They are talking about supporting businesses, restaurants, whatever, with that tax credit. If they've already invested significantly in a license, or in the case of your family, it had been there for decades, I assume. So it just grown in price. Now, Brian, when you look at that $50,000 number, how'd they come up with that? Do you have any insight into that? It seems kind of random. And I'm going to go to Mayor Mike next on this too, because if I'm a restaurant owner and that license is worth $250,000, $500,000, what's $50,000 mean to me, Brian?
That doesn't mean enough. I mean, if I'm the business owner, it's like anything. You're invested in that. The sale of it could be your retirement fund. It could be It could be your launch board for your next business. And all of a sudden, what you thought was worth $250,000 is now worth 50. I mean, any business person could do the math on that. That's not a square deal.
Yeah.
But I think the important part of it is starting the conversation and perhaps it massages itself into something more palatable for both sides.
Yeah,
At least getting
good
the
point.
discussion going.
Well, I think that's the point. And Mayor Mike, this is one of the pain points of this, and we have to put ourselves in the shoes, like Brian said, of somebody who owns this license. And it's interesting that Mayor Pat has the experience as she does with her family. These licenses, it's it's supply and demand, and that's what it's become. Even though it may be artificial, so there are only so many, they're worth so much, and these families have held on to them. Some of them are pocket licenses; they aren't active, and but yet it's their retirement. How do you really, honestly, Mayor Mike, how do you compensate somebody for that?
Yeah. So before we talk about that pain, let me just throw out the $50,000. Okay. So that the valuation and the tax credit is an iterative process. There is no hard and fast numbers yet on that. The
Okay.
$50,000, it's in a draft bill, capping it at a look back of 3 years of tax receipts. There's a lot of language back and forth. So don't memorialize $50,000 right now in your mind. Okay, it's really not etched in stone, or not even etched in chalk or an etch a sketch. But to get to your question on the pain of it, yeah, there are people out there who look at this as a 401k or a retirement, and we have to be, empathetic to that, right? But whenever you have a change, there's always going to be some collateral damage, right? There's no growth without some pain. So we have to figure out how to strike a balance with that, right? This isn't going to be a scorched earth policy, but again, to Pat's family, they made a profit over many generations, or at least 30 years of that liquor license, which they bought probably at next to nothing 30 years. And then 30 years later, it was worth a lot more money. Now,
Right.
having said that, when you flood the market or add more to the market of any given market, the value of existing will go down. If you
Right.
look at it as an investment, then let's face it, any investment is subject to the volatility of any given market. And if
Yeah.
you have a market that's artificially created, well, so be it.
It feels like we've painted ourselves into a corner. We artificially created a market, and we're sort of artificially trying to fix it. I don't know that you have any other choice. You have to fix it. I do see what you're saying. It's not pure capitalism how it was created. Anytime you put restrictions on, anytime you put numbers, Mayor Pat, when you look at this and go to your family for a moment, there's also been a conversation, and I think Mike brings up the fact that 50,000 not etched in stone, and that's good that that's still being discussed. But when you go back to that, what number? Can you even say what number would have been okay for your family if they were facing that? And they said, "Oh my gosh, what just happened to this investment?" Or do they not see it that way?
Well, I think Mayor Mike was right. All the years, and it was well over 60 years that we've owned the business.
There you go.
So, we made our money,
Yeah.
and it's all supply and demand. And I think, that of course raised the price up. I mean, Hoboken was the same way. You couldn't get a license, and it would cost you over $1 million to get a license to have a business. And that's crazy, because you know how long it would take to make back that money.
Yeah.
Know?
Well, it is, we do have to sometimes make these hard choices, right? In order to fix problems that we have. Mayor Mike, have you heard the conversation about splitting and being able to sell 2 licenses? So the current conversation, if you hold one, and perhaps then you're allowed to actually sell 2. Of course, again, they're still going to go down in value. What do you think about that proposal?
I have not heard that proposal coming out of the governor's office. So
Yeah.
I don't know is that coming from the governor's office, or you just heard that coming around?
We heard that through Jersey First, that was a potential solution. And I don't know that it's reached the point of a committee or legislation, but that might be one way to ease the pain for the current license holders, that they can actually, you sort of overnight double it for them and they can sell it.
Yeah, I heard. I mean, it's there's a draft bill. It's not in the draft bill either, but
Yeah.
it's like a stock split, right? So it certainly is a very creative and interesting concept, right?
Yeah.
But if I own a liquor license in a very small town in the Pine Barrens that's worth $75,000, and I have one at the Jersey Shore that's worth $1.5 million, and now I have 2 at the Jersey Shore and 2 in the Pine Barrens, that stock split seems to be kind of odd. So I'd have to think about that and do the math.
Well, there are a lot of things to consider. There's no easy answer here. The
No,
fact
there's not. Yeah.
the fact that we're addressing it, I think, is important. Brian, you brought up the breweries. I have a friend who opened one here in Whippany, and he shared with me the pain of the regulations that they're facing. And of course, I heard from bar owners, well, hey, too bad. We've invested. We're a bar. You're not. These breweries really struggle with some pretty crazy restrictions. How much would this change help them and really change that industry for New Jersey?
I mean, I'm not all the way in on what goes on there, but you just from what you read in the paper, it seemed like when you look back, it was a smart idea when Governor Florio signed the legislation that allowed breweries to open in New Jersey, and then we just kind of went from there. It seemed like it was going really good, and then all of a sudden, it seems like someone says, "Well, time to stop the party." You start
Yeah.
limiting amount of events you can have on site.
Yeah.
Started limiting events you can have off site. You no longer can have a relationship with outside food. I can appreciate restaurants not wanting the competition on the cheap down the street, but it just seemed like we got a little too far overreach on that, and I think that's starting to hurt them. And I think that part of the conversation has got to take place at the same time to protect them and make them thrive. Because again, it's a unique part of our fabric here that brings people to those type of places that would normally be there.
Right, exactly. And that's a unique part of the New Jersey fabric, right? These breweries, which are very interesting. Mayor Pat, does this give the municipalities these proposals? Does it give you more power, more oversight, more sort of home rule so that you can make decisions that make sense for your particular town?
Of course, the governing body will always oversee everything that happens in the town. Being small and not really having the area to have a brewery, unfortunately, but do I see the interest? Oh, absolutely. I have an interest myself.
Yeah.
I started making wine in Hackettstown, and then they opened up a brewery up the block. The only thing is they couldn't have food, so you were able to go there, but then you had to bring your own food. And you're right, the restrictions. To me, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Especially you want to have food when you have alcohol involved anyway. And then they do have to restrict.
You do. That's actually a good thing. I don't know if you guys really have thought about this, but if you travel to Europe, it's very rare that anyone would sit down and have a drink without food.
Yeah.
And that's a safety issue and a health issue. It really isn't wise. I know these breweries might have potato chips hanging on the wall, but that's not going to cut it, right? So you bring up a good point. I got to bring up, Mayor Mike, I got to bring up the pandemic. So now we're looking at an industry that was just hurt so much over those 2+ years, really trying to bounce back. Does that play into this? Is the timing unfortunate? How do you feel when you think about these restaurants and bars who just got so hurt by all the shutdowns and all the regulations?
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. They got crushed. They got and let's do something for them to stimulate that business so that they don't go off the edge of a cliff, right? And bring it back even better, right? Not just to bring it back to where it was, but let's do something to even make it better for New Jersey, as a whole, for sure.
So you see this as a pro restaurant, pro bar, pro the whole industry. You see this as a movement that supports them in general. Mayor Mike, do you see it that way?
More than that. This is more than just the restaurant and bar business, because if you look at the supply chain upstream and downstream, I look at the local contractors that fix houses, right? They're going to go into the old store that had a retail storefront, and they're going to go in there and rip down all the walls and build a bar. So they're going to hire carpenters, electricians, plumbers, okay? And then they're going to go buy stuff from the local place that sells tile and plumbing supplies. So there's an entire supply chain that's going to be impacted in a positive way as well. It's not just the restaurant industry. It's an incredible lift to the economy all around.
Yeah, that makes sense. Mayor Pat, have you talked to any mayors who say, you're crazy, Pat? What are you doing? We think this is horrible, this legislation. Any of them that didn't sign this, what are their thoughts?
Actually, yes. I mean, there has been some opposition. They feel that because of the pandemic, people, as far as money goes, you're watching your pennies. So they feel that they're actually being forced when they go into a restaurant or whatever to buy their alcohol, which the markup can go up to 300%.
Yeah.
So they feel that, they want to save money by being able to bring a bottle of wine to sit and not have to pay 20, 30, $40 for a bottle of wine.
Right.
And also with the tips too, they feel that way.
Yeah.
But, like with anything, opposition is always good. Good ideas, and that's how we work things out.
Well, we wouldn't be New Jersey if we didn't
Right.
oppose things that were coming before the Assembly and the Senate. Let's wrap this by giving just where are we at, and I'm going to go to you, Mayor Mike, because we've talked a lot about a lot of different issues here. This hasn't passed yet. It's not in its final form. Discussion is happening. Of course, we've got the associations weighing in, and they've got their own approach. I know that they want the governor to consider. So where do we stand today as we're taping this show in terms of this potential legislation?
Yeah, so there's a draft bill out. It's going to be a hugely iterative process. As you know, legislation goes through a lot of variations. There's a few sponsors out there. I think that we need to get more mayors involved. I think at the end of the day, Main Street really needs this, and the more mayors we get, the more pressure we get. We need to make sure that our legislators aren't afraid to do the right thing for this, because I think if you run only to get reelected, then you're the wrong person for the job. So that's my take on it.
Well, you have to make hard decisions, as we've said a couple of times during this interview. And this may be one of them. Mayor Pat, are you hopeful that they will find all the different fine points that will make at least the majority of the people happy? You can't make them all happy, but potentially the majority.
Oh, absolutely. And, being such antiquated, old rules, I'm hoping that let's get into the 20th century. Let's bring this, let's open people's eyes. And you know what? I think Mayor Mike was right. And I've always said that. I am not putting in my personal feelings. I do what I think is best for the town and the people that live here.
Yeah.
And that's what's important. And truly, I think anytime that you're doing something to better your town or your area, then you're doing the right thing. And I think this is a great idea.
Brian, I'll give you the final word. You want to see this pass in some form?
Well, I'm sorry, what was that?
Do you want to see this pass in some form? This legislation?
I mean, some form. Definitely, some form it's important. Again, it's good to get the discussion going and going through. I just really kind of hope that lobbyists and special interests don't carry the day here and screw up a good cause. That's really what it comes down to.
Good point. I would like just to say that in general, Brian, we can take that out and put that on every single issue we face in this country and in this state. Best quote of the day. Sorry, Mayor Mike, Mayor Pat, but I loved that. That was great, Brian. Guys, thank you. There's a lot more on this. We're going to be watching it, and I know you're passionately following it and hoping to see the change. So we'll probably do a follow-up show. But we appreciate you guys, and we appreciate you looking out for the fine people of New Jersey, each of you. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Okay, guys, we'll see you, my audience. We'll see you guys next time.